It worked.
Yay.
Yay. Great. This is my first time on IG Live, so uh, if any
This,
technical difficulties happen, it's my
this is
fault.
my first time, second time for it actually working. I tried once before and it didn't work. So I was like, I was the Teddy Riley of the situation. It was terrible.
Yeah, you just have to delete it really fast. But for those watching, my name is Yasmina Marabit, and I'm an organizer and co-founder of Link Up at Link Up It's Official on Instagram. It's an honor to host a conversation on the Our City DC platform, and especially with you, Janice, as someone who is running for political office in Ward 4 in DC, and someone who's actually native to DC. So I just want to open up with you introducing yourself and um, basically like why you are running for office right now in DC.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and really love Link Up It's Official and the movement that you guys are just building and continuing to build, especially in this moment where we need leaders to actually link up and organize and fight. Um, as you know, I'm native Washingtonian, so actually grew up here, third generation. I was born and raised actually here in Ward 4 where I'm running. So I grew up on 2nd and Kennedy Street, which back in the day we used to refer to as the KDY, for those of you who know. Um, and I, went to DC public schools all the way through. Proud DC public schools graduate all the way through. For me, I think my frustration started really when I was younger. It started early on when we first started seeing some of the issues happening with gentrification. My grandmother, was the lunch lady at my, junior high school. She retired DCPS lunch lady. My grandfather had passed on, and she has a house here in the city, and property tax started going up. This is right before they started building the stadium and doing all these things. And so that was when I first actually stood up, and that's when I was young and ran for youth mayor, ran for school board, really wanted to get active and start speaking about inequalities. But when I came back from serving, I did a year of service for city year. So my year after college, I came back, and my mom let me know that the house that we grew up in on 2nd and Kennedy Street, that the rent had gone up twice, and it was going up a third time. And so I was supposed to be starting law school at Howard just that month. So I ended up taking on a job as a waitress, taking on a job as a sales clerk at Nordstrom Rack, and doing like law school at the same time. And, my mom has a good union job. She works for the post office. And yet, despite having a good union job, she was unable for us to afford to stay here any longer. And I had to take on jobs to be able to help and support, us being able to stay here. And so that's where really, I started to realize, where our city was going and the direction we were going in. And so it's just been, since then, we've seen changes happen in our city, particularly with my current council member. It really started back in 2016 for me with paid family leave. We had, I had just come home and experienced my father being sick and having to take leave to care for him. And after I, took the leave, I took unpaid leave because I took all my vacation and sick leave to care for him. My father ended up actually passing away the spring of 2016. And I, was so upset, but I wasn't regretful for taking the leave I did. But I did realize, become resentful at the fact that became the case for so many, having to take care of your children, your spouses, your parents, and deserving to have a living wage while doing so. So I went to go advocate to the council member, like, hey, this is so important. You have to pass paid family leave. And despite my advocacy, he decided to go on and still vote against it. And that was in 2016. And then 2017 happened. And that was our TOPA rights. And TOPA rights are your Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act rights. And tenants who live in buildings have them, but also single family renters also have those rights. And so when our family actually got displaced from our first home, we ended up moving into another house. And when we did, we were renting. And the owner of that house actually, was like, oh, the market's great. I'm selling. You guys got to go. And I was like, great. I'm going to exercise my TOPA rights, which is your first right, and be able to purchase a home for my family. When I did that, exercise my TOPA rights, felt really great because it was a moment, where I was able to stop my family from displacement. But then literally months later, my current council member co-sponsored a bill to take away TOPA rights from family renters. And so, and since those TOPA rights have been taken away, 6,000 more residents have been displaced as a result from him. And once again, I went to go talk about it. I was like, look, 22,000 families have been displaced. Do not take away these rights. And he still decided to take away those rights. And then 18 came, and it was Initiative 77. Don't know how much you know about Initiative 77, but it was a fair wage for tipped workers. And I had worked as a tip worker throughout my time in law school to be able to help support my family. So I knew that $3.89 just wasn't enough for families to be able to survive. And so obviously I was a huge supporter of Initiative 77. We voted for it as a ward here in Ward 4. The entire city voted for it. And as soon as we voted for it, literally as soon as we voted for it, our council member here in our ward and other council members actually voted to repeal the will of the voters, right? And so for me, in 2016, when it came to paid family leave, our council member sided with the big business interests. And then in 2017, when it came with TOPA rights, he sided with developer interests. And then in 2018, when it came to Initiative 77 and a fair wage for tip workers, he sided with the big restaurant industry. Every time it's come between working families and working people, he sides with special interests. And my council member isn't the only one who has done this, but the majority of the council has, which is why I'm in this race right now, because gentrification did not just happen. And people have to get that myth. It was policies and people who made it happen. And so if we're going to change the policies and change the trajectory of our city, we're going to have to change the people who make the policies. And that's why I'm in this fight.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, I feel like, you know, we were thinking we were going to have a conversation centered around housing in DC, and I don't think we can really even talk about housing solutions without acknowledging, you know, the uprisings that are happening all around the country. And right now, at this very moment, there are thousands of people in Washington, DC that are in the streets, you know, protesting against police brutality and police killings that are routinely taking place in the Black community, not to mention the routine incarceration of people in Black and brown communities. And the police play kind of a central role as enforcers of displacement and gentrification in Washington, D.C. And just want to hear your comments on that connection between over-policing of Black communities and actual, you know, housing policy and the process of gentrification.
Right, because the reality is all of these things are absolutely connected, right? And so, you know, I hear so many leaders right now who are, you know, after what we've seen happen with George Floyd, with Breonna Taylor, with Ahmaud Arbery, you know, who are now saying, you know, Black Lives Matter, right? And I don't want any leaders saying Black Lives Matter, but also underfunding our public schools. I don't want any leaders saying Black Lives Matter, but also militarizing our police department. I don't want anyone saying, leaders saying Black Lives Matter, but not ending our chronic homelessness problem in our city, which we absolutely have the funding to do. I don't want to hear anyone saying Black Lives Matter when you don't want to pay people a fair wage, right? I don't want to hear you say Black Lives Matter when the lives that are here in this city, who've been here in this city, have already been disproportionately and systematically dealt with racism every single day by the policies that you created, right? Don't just tell me Black Lives Matter, show me Black Lives Matter. And, you know, I'm in my race right now, and, you know, they have been attacking me saying, oh, she's against the police department because I made a statement that, you know, militarization of the police, you know, is one of the greatest threats to our community. And I was like, I don't understand. Militarization of the police is one of the greatest threats to our urban communities. We see it happening right now across this country. Our police department is not trained to go to war. Our military is trained to go to war. You should not be coming into our communities as if you're going to war. Right? I thought your mission was to protect and serve. How can you protect and serve a community you hate? How can you protect and serve a community you're willing to literally put your knee on someone's neck for 8 minutes plus seconds? How can you say that, right? So this is a moment we have to realize that you know, if Black Lives Matter, let it matter in every single way. You're talking, you got people, leaders right now giving all these speeches here, and it's the same leaders who just closed. Washington Met was a school here in our city that serves students who were in transition, students who some of them had behavioral issues, some of them were safety transfers. Our entire school board members voted to keep that school open. Please don't close this school. All the parent teacher associations voted, please don't close this school. And guess what? Our council member and several other council members still voted to close that school and said, oh, it was failing. It was failing because they didn't provide counselors to these students. They didn't provide the teachers with the resources. They didn't provide any trauma support to these students. But yet they're like, oh, well, it's a bad school. We need to close it. You know, all of this has been happening for so long in our community. And so, you know, it is absolutely, you know, frustrating to me now that, you know, certain leaders have, you know, wanted to stand up right now and give us a soliloquy. I don't want to hear it, because we've been fighting with you. When we were talking about TOPA rights, we knew that taking away TOPA rights were going to displace more people, and you did it anyway. Mm-hmm. We've been asking to reclaim rent control right now, expand our rent control laws. And I am the only person in my race who signed on to it. And there's only about 4 current council members who signed on to it, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about adding thousands of more units of affordable housing, but everyone's not doing it, but Black Lives Matter. You know what I mean? So I am just absolutely frustrated with people just saying, you know, saying the words and giving these soliloquies. Like, realize that all of these things are connected. Health access. We have the highest rate of mortality for Black mothers in this country. Right here in this city, Black women are dying at a substantial rate in the hospitals giving birth, right? And then dying in general, but not being treated fairly. Yet you're telling me Black Lives Matter. Do Black women matter? Because if they do, why don't we have a hospital east of the river? Do Black Lives Matter? Because we don't have a Trauma 1 center east of the river currently right now. We lost Providence Hospital in Ward 5. We lost United Medical Center and many of its foundations. So don't tell me if they matter if health access doesn't matter. And then for our immigrant communities, mm-hmm. they create barriers to even accessing healthcare. You have to come down every 6 months to this location. You got to go do this. These people have jobs that they have to work to help their families. You're talking about Black Lives Matter when right now during this crisis, there are families and people who don't qualify for unemployment insurance. Mm-hmm. Some because of their immigration status, some because they're independent contractors. We fought for the council, you know, and I'll call out Phil Mendelson. We fought with the council and said, listen, we need to create a cash assistance fund for our immigrant community who don't qualify for unemployment insurance. It was in the original legislation. Over the weekend, the chair of the council took that legislation out, took that piece out, and didn't fund cash assistance for our immigrant communities. So don't tell me Black Lives Matter when you haven't done anything, when we ask you to give $5 million, $10 million to our immigrant communities. So you see what I mean? All of these policies have been coming up and happening during COVID and even after COVID. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I don't want to hear the words anymore if they're not going to come with action, if they're not going to come with policy. Yeah. You know, I can't.
Exactly. So how do people differentiate between, you know, the fake and the real when it comes to politicians? Because when we're you know, out in the community talking to people and organizing, especially when we're talking to younger people, yeah. A lot of younger people are, you know, they're not politically engaged at all. Right. And, you know, because they can see the BS, for the lack of another way to put it. So, you know, everybody is paying lip service to these issues, and everybody is saying, well, yeah, you know, it's a terrible thing that this police officer, you know, murdered a Black person. And so, but what are you going to do to adjust the system to make that not a possibility in our society?
Right.
And so for you as a candidate, you know, running for political office to, you know, represent Washingtonians and to represent working people from what you're describing, how do you mark that difference between yourself and those that are just paying lip service to the issues?
Yeah, so, you know, it's really hard because a lot of what some of our leaders do in this city will attach themselves to something that is like a low level super like thing, and make it seem like they're for the culture, right? So we saw that with like the go-go legislation, right? It passed overwhelmingly, right? And people are like, right. I support go-go.
Right.
like a little frustrated on the day that they had the celebration, because it was a number of individuals who were like, a part of passing the go-go legislation that really haven't been down for the people who are a part of go-go's culture. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
why it's keenly important for you not to just look at, who's doing the taking pictures, who's out doing these videos, but really getting engaged into the conversations and really understanding what's happening. And what I've been saying to young people is, you recognize what leaders are willing to listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We had a group of young leaders from Washington Met who came and wanted to speak to our council member, and he never took a meeting with them to speak with them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Also look at how they're being funded. Right. So right now, I'm a fair elections candidate, right, which means I'm not taking any developer money, any corporate money, any PAC money. Look
Mm-hmm.
at look at your leaders donating to their campaign. Some of these developers are donate tons of money to our candidates, right? W.C. Smith, for example, they're a known slumlord who they tried to evict over 120 tenants during the COVID crisis, until emergency legislation came from the council that said you can't evict right now. But then they donated over $6,800 to my opponent in this race, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to follow the money in this city, because if you follow, the money, and you
Yeah.
follow the money, you'll follow the votes, and you'll see who's there. So I need people to pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to the groups and organizations who are supporting which candidates. I'm proud to be supported and endorsed by Black Lives Matter DC. Me and Anthony Lorenzo Green, who is in Ward 7, are both endorsed by Black Lives Matter. And we went through a vigorous process of, them interviewing and talking to us and going through those things. So like organizations who have stepped out right now, Sanctuary DMV also stands up for immigrants' rights, right? Have been fighting to make sure that we keep ICE out of our neighborhoods, and they've endorsed in this race too, right? The idea of endorsements isn't just to be like, "Ooh, I have endorsements," because everyone's like, "Oh, Janie's so dope, you got 30 endorsements." Look at who those endorsements are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of those groups and organizations really vet each of the candidates to decide who's going to have the best interest for what you're interested in. And so, that's another way for you to start seeing who is, I'm supported by literally every frontline worker. So like ATU is our bus drivers, 1199 SEIU are healthcare workers, the Washington Teachers Union, our teachers, right? So you see that like frontline workers are standing with me, our immigrant organizations are standing with me, our, Black Lives Matter is standing with me. And so that's a signal for you to say, let me look into this person and start to see what they're doing. If you see someone not endorsed by the organizations that represent your values, you should start questioning if this is a person who is really for me, and then start looking at who's willing to give you a seat at the table. We just seen the mayor, reopen DC committee. The Open DC committee was missing critical voices, teachers' voices, parents' voices, young people voices. We just did a youth panel the other day, and I said, young people, I noticed that none of your voices were on the Reopen DC plan. What are you doing? Organize. Organize right now and protest to have your voices be on the Reopen DC Council. What are you doing? So it is, I recognize that, politicians aren't going to get it done in the way that organizers can get it done. I'm come from, the organizing grassroots community. And so I want organizers to continue to organize and don't lean just on politicians to get it done. But I'm here as a voice on the political level to take what organizers are demanding and actually give it some voice and give it some way to be able to help and push legislation we need to support the issues that we care about. And that's what you need to be looking for when you're deciding who you're voting for, who you're supporting, who's going to give you a voice at the table, and who's going to give your voice a voice at our table when it comes to being on the council and producing the legislation. It's going to take all of us to continue to organize, to continue to agitate, to continue to work. And so, don't lean on just politicians. You still have to do the work on a grassroots level to get things done.
Yeah, no question about that. But speaking of frontline workers, I just want to give an opportunity for you to give any comments that you have on the prison population. We're talking about frontline communities outside of the system of mass incarceration facing, police brutality and facing an attack by the so-called criminal justice system, and ushered into, cages. And so, the question is, right now, there's so much going on. In addition to the protests and things that are happening, we're also in the middle of a global health pandemic,
Yep.
and prisoners are on the front lines, of facing like the health and death consequences of this epidemic. And so, what are your comments on that, and especially in relation to, what you said earlier about the militarization of the police being a backwards move, obviously, for our society. But what is the way forward, and what is the way to elevate and support the prison population?
Yeah, I mean, the prison population here in our city was failed. Failed across the country, really, but I can't deal with what's going on the global level. I can deal with happening locally. And we knew before, as we were going into the crisis, that we needed to, that the way prison is set up was going to breed continued, infections of this disease, right? And we had an opportunity to do something, and we really failed, right? We saw others, states and cities standing up, making sure we weren't making arrests, and then we still had our police department making arrests during this time.
Mm-hmm.
We and not wearing PPE, which they're still not wearing PPE right now during this time at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw, a stand to have releases done. And we didn't see the level of releases that were demanded. When we talk about, people who were in prison for, it wasn't even just lower level offenses, people who have served their time, right? One of the biggest things was, I'm a supporter of the Second Look Amendment Act, which really recognizes, what rehabilitation looks like with young people, and, making sure that, like, when you're young, you're not even fully developed to a point where you can really rationalize and make rational decisions. There are neuroscience. Even the Supreme Court has recognized this, and it was a point for us to recognize that. And so we look at what a second chance, a second look looks like, right? We were asking for that in many of the instances right now, and we didn't see that happening. Mm-hmm. I think one of the critical issues here in DC, which is terrible, is that we're not a state. And so it is ridiculous the way in which the federal government controls how we handle criminal justice here in our community. Mm-hmm. Literally, whoever the president appoints, and who happens to be at this time Trump, has jurisdiction over our parole system.
Yeah.
We need to take local control back over our parole system. We need to reconfigure home rule and take it back immediately, because that's what's stopping a lot of our individuals who are coming out of prison. We have to get statehood, because the U.S. attorney literally has tried time and time again to go against our efforts, literally lobbying our ANC commissioners and everyone to actually not pass the Second Look Amendment Act. I mean, we are just in a terrible place here in the district, because even the attorney general who we vote for as supposed to be our, person for criminal justice, doesn't even get a say so. And so whoever the president appoints is who gets to control much of our criminal justice system. And it has led us down a terrible path. And we have, very limited fight. Even when it comes to our detention centers, right, with ICE, right, the federal jurisdiction, the federal marshals will turn over individuals to ICE. And we've asked to have no cooperation with that. And yet, once again, federal marshals say, we don't have to listen to you, DC. We can do what we want to do. Once they come into our jurisdiction, they're ours. And so it's just extremely frustrating being here, particularly where we see other, organizations being able to fight with their governor to get things done. We really have we can go to the mayor, but all she can do really is give a recommendation, and they don't have to listen to it at all. So it's why our fight for statehood is actually so important, because our hands get tied so much of the time, and where our hands haven't gotten tired, we've literally just failed to do. And so I've been very disappointed, during COVID-19, pre-COVID-19, post-COVID-19, with the way, our system is continuing to work. And we have to talk about also returning citizens too, and the lack of, work that we're giving to our returning citizens, and also trying to help people be able to expunge, go through the expungement process. That's also a process that has been ridiculous here in our city, and trying to make sure people are able to start over their life. But when we talk about citizens returning, they have to return to something, right? And so housing and supports to be able to get jobs and helping them reacclimate to this community are something that I'm so big on and helping and supporting, which is why at the Attorney General's office, one of the programs we had was our Cure Violence Interrupters program. And we literally, our Cure Violence Interrupters are returning citizens who go back into the community and try to save some lives that they see going down the wrong path. And that's the better way to handle, crime here, in our community, by, working together and recognizing that we have the ability and the power to keep us safe as a community.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you've talked about like policy changes and, the fact that those can take place when you have the right people in office.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, from an organizing perspective, it's very frustrating when the policies can change at any given time. You know what I mean? Like, you can win something and then you can lose it again because of all these processes that they have set up. So even though DC has some of the most, progressive tenant laws on the books, including TOPA, which you mentioned earlier, it's still the most rapidly gentrifying city in the country. So what does that tell us about, what the rules are versus like what plays out in reality, and the fact that there is money changing hands and there are interests, developer interests, money interests, big business interests that are being represented by those who are holding elected office. So, in what ways can we enact systemic change that is not something that, you can roll back and forth on, like all these different policies that, it just goes on and on. It just goes on, and there's still more and more homeless people. And, now we have Trump as president. We have the Trump luxury hotel sitting in the old federal post office building in the middle of Washington, D.C. We have, an exploding homeless population, but we have plenty of vacant units, all across the city that could rectify this situation. So it's like, how can we just change it all up and resolve these issues on a more immediate basis, rather than all this like, well, we have to take this little step and then we take that little step, and when are we going to get there? Like, what can we do to actually get there? What is the plan from your perspective?
Yeah. What I would like to call that is like the bureaucracy that occurs once a legislation is passed. Because once a legislation is passed, it also has to be funded. And then in addition to funding, it has to be implemented.
Right.
And I got to tell you, the only thing that can be done is what we see happening right now with organizers and organization groups calling it out. You need officials who are going to do it, have accountability, and call out and have that oversight. But like, just like we saw with the NEAR Act, right? There were provisions of the NEAR Act that call for election, right? That were supposed to be happening. It wasn't happening. ACLU, two lawsuits went out. We prevailed. And then the NEAR Act is now starting to be implemented. And what did we get back? Data that kind of showed us what we knew was going to happen, which is why they're playing it, right? In DC, only 1% out of 63,000 stops actually resulted in finding guns when we talk about stop and frisk. So 1%, 63,000 is what we've seen, right? And it's similar what we saw in New York, but that's the data we were able to collect and get back. The only way we're able to do that is because ACLU stood up and did a lawsuit. So I got to be honest with you, it is about having leaders who are going to have accountability and call it out. I will say a number of leaders have tried to do that. So it is important to elect leaders who are going to be accountability, but it's still going to take outside organizations agitating and fighting back constantly.
And that's what we appreciate hearing, because that, what you're saying is like, you need the backing of the people. If people want you to enforce what you can enforce where you're at, then you need to be backed by movement, so to speak,
Yep.
that's pushing things in that direction, like what we are seeing right now.
Yeah, because every time you
Yeah.
stand there and you take a stance, they
Hmm.
will attack you. I've
Hmm.
been attacked several times.
Exactly.
Like right
Exactly.
I've been attacked, and oh, she said she wants to demilitarize and and they've come, and groups have stood up and said, no, these are the facts, and I appreciate, when ACLU stood up, Black Lives Matter has stood up, Sanctuary DMV, all these organizations have stood up, but that's what it takes, right? It's like this combination of, and then you also have the ability to call me out,
Hmm.
and that's where that cycle has to continue. So we see all the time develop, one of the reasons why a number of the union groups are backing me, Local 25, UFCW, our grocery workers, our hotel workers, is because we saw development happen in
Hmm.
Southwest, right? The
Hmm.
wharf. They
Hmm.
create this beautiful new wharf, hotel, restaurant, all these things. Zero
Hmm.
union jobs.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
zero.
Yeah. Not to
Not,
mention they gave it for
yeah.
$1 to Jeff Griffiths,
Mhm.
a known slumlord.
Right. Exactly. So here's the thing. When I'm on the council, I get to fight to be like, no, none of this should ever happen. There's
Hmm.
never be a way where we're creating new development and union jobs aren't created as a result. There's no way that we had a deal with Walmart where they were supposed to have a Walmart in Ward 7.
Hmm.
Instead, we got two Walmarts here in Ward 4,
Hmm.
right next to our Safeways, which are union jobs, local 400 UFCW.
Hmm.
And then we have building coming up now within Walter Reed, and they're asking for bringing in another non-union, grocery store, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
this is why it's important to have leaders on the front, because the unions are like, I'm riding with you because we need you to ride for us, because all this development is happening in the city, but I also need you to have oversight, because what we saw with the Line Hotel in Ward 1, right? They've got a $40 million tax abatement. $40 million. They were supposed to hire DC workers. They were supposed to hire DC contractors. They didn't do any of it. Brianna Doe stood up and said, this is wrong. We need to do something. Called on Attorney General Carl Racine. Alyssa called on Attorney General Carl Racine to try to do something. And the mayor was like, oh, well, they made a good faith effort, right? Like, they got a $40 million tax payment, right? So, like, there's an accountability problem. There's an oversight problem.
Hmm.
And then, when we go to bat, we have to have people on the outside at the council too, storming the Wilson building, agitating, fighting back at the same time. And I think that's the piece that goes missing, because sometimes, with the Chopa rights, for example, they push that really quickly through the council. Amazingly, that bills get stuck in the council all the time, but it went through really quick, and we didn't have a chance to organize. And so now that's why I'm so keen on okay, we need groups to organize right now. Tenants Union, are you ready? Who's ready? Like stump out slum lords from DSA. Are you ready? I need all of you, because I'm going to bring Ward, come go with war with the council on, bringing back tenants' rights and expanding rent control. But I need you with me at the same time, so because nothing happens without push and without agitation.
Hmm.
Have to realize oversight, when the lack of oversight has happened because
Hmm.
people have ignored what's happening. No one's calling it out. When we talk about Douglas development, the one time we saw it was like Douglas development was about to sell a building in Tacoma to ICE, and it was going to be a juvenile center right here in our community. And we were like, no, we cannot have any cages here in our community. And we had to fight back and agitate, and we had to get out there. We created a protest within 3 days. And a number of people came out, but that's how fast you got to organize, and that's how quickly you got to have people fighting back, because if we don't, things go over our head. And that's what happened with gentrification. Like, people were smiling in people's faces, showing up, taking pictures, and so they give off the facade that I'm for you, I'm with you, things are happening, and then they're in the council legislating you right out of this city.
Yeah, yeah. I have a few pictures myself that prove that very point. Um, but yeah, I don't want to hold you for too long, because I know you've had a long day and we've been going for about 40 minutes. But I do have just one last kind of wrap up question is, Where are things at with your campaign? Because I know, you know, from the beginning, you hit the ground running and you've been organizing like crazy.
Mhm.
And just want to know, like, where do you feel like things stand? And then what do people need to know about voting in local elections? Why is it important to vote in local elections? And anything that you want people to know about the voting process itself. You know, it's you know, anybody can do it,
Yeah.
mostly.
Where do we stand? We're standing ready to win. We have organized. It's been a grassroots movement the whole way through. I just got an endorsement today from the 1010 Act,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
tenant association.
Mm-hmm.
But we have over 30 organizations. And the most important I told you is like when I got the frontline workers on my team, it's just been amazing. You know, people are like, oh, you know, we need to respect our frontline workers. Well, if you are with your frontline workers, they're standing with me, literally, from the teachers union to the healthcare workers to the bus drivers. They're all standing with me. And you know, this is going to be, you know, some people are saying it's a close race. So I'm going to say it's a close race, but in my mind, it's not. We are in this, and we're going to do so. But we need everyone to come out. Voter apathy does not help us at all. Understand that this is a council with 13 members, and you need 7 votes to get anything passed, right? And so there were close votes this year that could have happened that wouldn't have happened if we had one more vote on the council, right? The closing of Washington Met would not have happened if we had one more vote on the council, but it did because we did not have that vote, right? We see it happen time and time again where we try to pass good legislation, right? In the council, and you have all these members, but you don't have enough votes. So in order to flip this council, this race is the race that will flip the seats on the council. We need 2 more votes to be able to actually get some of the work done. The work done in corruption. We're trying to get rid of outside jobs. It's come to a vote before, didn't have enough votes to pass it, right? And so every time, even with TOPA, 1 vote. That's how we got rid of TOPA laws, by 1 vote. That's how all your rights were taken away. So in order to extend our rent control right now, expand it in the way we want to, we're going to need 2 votes. We're 2 votes short, right? So that's how critical this election is, that the trajectory of our city is so important. Also, I tell people, you saw the mayor's reopen DC plan and who was on it. It wasn't people on the ground doing the work. And so I'm ready to get in there now and amplify the voices of the people who are on the ground doing the work, whose voices have been ignored, you know? And so that's why I need people to come out and vote. This election, obviously, if you have already requested your ballot, you have to send your ballot in by June 2nd. It has to be postmarked by June 2nd to come in. If you haven't done so, you can vote. There's 20 early voting centers that are open across the city. You can vote at any of the early voting centers. Here in Ward 4, we have 3 that are closest to us, which is Ida B. Wells Middle School, which is our new middle school that's attached to Coolidge High School. So most people might know Coolidge. So right where Coolidge High School is, across from Whittier, we have Raymond Recreation Center, and we have Emory Heights Community Center on Georgia Avenue. So Emory Heights Community Center is on Georgia Avenue in Madison, and then you have Raymond Recreation Center that's on 10th and Spring. You can vote today up until 7 p.m. They're open every day, including Monday and then Tuesday, and it'll be open from 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. So you can come out and vote 8:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. We need every single person to vote. I tell everyone, if you're an organizer, if you're an agitator, if you want to see change, I know voter apathy is real. I know you want to be like, I'm over all of this, but that's how they continue to let this happen. You saw it. We see it with the president of the United States. I don't know how we got there. I don't want to talk about how we got there because
Me neither.
that was a whole other. We can have another session on how we ended up here.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you sit on the sidelines right now, especially with this global pandemic crisis, especially with the attack and militarization of police departments across this country, if you sit on the front lines right now, you're just as much a part of the problem. So get out there, get out here, join an organization. You can go to my website, which is janice4dc.com, Janice, the number 4dc.com. You can see all of my organizations. I join one of them. If you're an environmental activist, join, right? Because you can't talk about environmental justice without talking about social justice, without talking about economic justice, without talking about racial justice. So I don't care by which lens you get into this fight. I just need you in this fight. And so please come out and vote. Encourage your family members to get out here and vote. Everybody in DC knows everybody. It's like literally 1 degree of separation. So call your cousin, your friend who you think lives uptown, and get them out to the polls. And in Ward 7, I need you to go out there and vote for my brother, Anthony Lorenzo Green, who is fighting over in Ward 7 in his race as well. But we need you. We need you to get up. I said it the other day. I said, get up and get out there. Organize, agitate, and vote. That's what you got to do. That's what you have to do. I can't. Leaders like, I'm here and I'm ready to fight on the front lines with you, but I can't do it without you. But I recognize.
Yeah, people have to participate in all aspects.
Yep.
And we have to build our own coordination amongst, like-minded people.
Exactly.
To build the system we want to see. So thank you so much, Janice, for your time. Really appreciate you being and I was, like I said at the beginning, happy to host this on the Our City DC platform because it's getting information, getting news, getting on the ground updates out to the city. So
yeah,
thank you for your time. And thank you for all the information, and we'll have another session maybe
we'll have
about Trump.
The victory after the victory. Thank you.
All right, see you later.
See ya.